I'm extremely fortunate in my position here to get a chance to speak to the class each year on the evening before classes start. On some levels, this ought to be an academic speech because this is an academic assembly. And in some ways, I suppose it will be. For the most part, however, I hope that you can receive these words as a true commencement speech, given your own commencement tomorrow of a full Bridgton Academy schedule. If my thoughts can help you to begin to put this year into a proper context, just as you venture into it, then you may find that the larger questions we will look at tonight might help you to get through the inevitable rough patches that you will encounter as the days turn into weeks and months. This past week, I've loved playing the role of observer, both of my incredibly dedicated and talented colleagues and of you, class of 2012, as you made your way tenaciously, creatively, and impressively willingly through a labyrinth of new regimens, rules, and expectations. In fact, tonight I want to focus on that last word, expectations, as well as two others, humility and activism. If I've seen any keys to success for students in my years here, those keys seem to coalesce or cluster around these words. During our rotations on Wednesday and Thursday, Mr. Katz spoke in his usual reassuring and informed manner of potential, that rather ephemeral or difficult to pinpoint concept that each of you, in varying degrees, has carried with you as you've moved through your life. Maybe your potential has been tied to athletics, or leadership, or academics, or the arts. It really doesn't matter. It still feels like a heavy weight, sometimes even an unbearable one. When I hear the word potential, however, I flip it around and see another word, expectations. Because potential can only be conferred upon someone if there are expectations involved. And, I'm sorry to say, those expectations will not disappear now that you have arrived in North Bridgton. I do believe, however, that the expectations that drive the potential label can be clarified and simplified here, so that you will have a much better chance of finally beginning to realize that potential. As most of you are aware, educational policies and philosophies in this country are undergoing some significant changes. In the midst of all the changes that are being implemented, however, one concept remains utterly clear, and that is that the teacher-student relationship is the most critical determinant in a student's progress. And within that relationship, those teachers who have set consistently and authentically high expectations realize the most positive change and growth in their students. So our promise to you is that we will keep the expectations high, but also give you the tools to reach those ambitious benchmarks. Now back to your own expectations. As I noted to last year's class, this particular moment of the year is perhaps, other than commencement, my favorite. As I look out at each of you, I know there are, hovering invisibly around you, countless of your own expectations. And they are right now in their purest form, because they have yet to be truly tested. You all have your own stories and reasons for being here at Bridgton, and this is the time of year, right before we start in earnest, that those reasons and the personal changes that you would like to make, or in other words, your expectations, are most clear to you. In reality, tonight all remains potential, and that is what makes this moment so special. You are poised between the current you and the you that came to Maine to meet both your expectations and the Academy's. And ultimately, if we as a community fulfill our mission, then the process through which you fulfill your own expectations, as well as Bridgton Academy's, will be very nearly one and the same. Making that transition will require some skills and traits that you all currently possess in varying levels, as well as a set of skills that you will learn and polish here. Creating that package of skills is what we do at Bridgton. As you work with us to create that skill set, I would like to look at the two other words I mentioned earlier, humility and activism. The first trait, to my way of thinking, is a highly underappreciated characteristic, the application of which, although sometimes incredibly difficult, is one of life's worthiest goals. That trait is humility. A year ago, I attended a relative's baptism, and the priest delivered a wonderful homily on the nature of humility. What struck me most about his observations was the way in which he defined this trait. Some mistake humility for humiliation, the feeling we all experience in varying stages when we fail to meet expectations. Others think humility is denying that they are good at something, when in fact they are, such as, oh, I'm really not that good a basketball player, after effortlessly dropping 40 points in a key playoff game. That is false humility, a rather ungracious trait. It is okay to be great at something as long as you carry it lightly. True humility, from the Latin root of humus, meaning of the earth, recognizes that all anybody possesses is derived from the efforts and presence of others. Yes, you may have wonderful, innate, athletic, intellectual, or artistic talent, but that talent cannot show itself without coaches, teachers, teammates, competitors, friends, and family as counterpoints. There would be little reason or opportunity to ever show your talent, nor would there be anything to compare it to. How would you know you were good at anything if you never had the chance to show it in relation to others? That 40 points in the playoff game would have no meaning without the many others who have scored well less than 40 points in a big game, or without your teammates to get the ball to you, and the opponents around whom you had to score those points. Just as with knowledge, our experience of the world is only built through comparison and interaction with others. In other words, the humble realization that our thoughts and actions are like the thoughts and actions that others have had, that we have observed, and against which we measure our own actions and achievements. And without trying to burrow too deeply on a muggy evening into larger philosophical issues, I want only to drive home that humility, therefore, is above all a function of community, of recognizing that there is a greater peace than you in the world. Not often the easiest thing to do when you're negotiating the shifting path to adulthood. The second trait, and the third and final word that I wanted to share with you this evening, is activism. I debated using the word action in place of activism because the concept of action may be easier to comprehend. But in keeping with my focus on expectations, I'm expecting you to work with me to understand why I think that the word activism is so critical to the upcoming generation of adults. The reason I have chosen this word lies in the numerous articles and editorials that I've read over this unsettled summer, in which our government has stalled, lost direction, and settled for the lowest common denominator of uncivil and small-minded discourse. It lies in a growing and corrosive distrust in the aims of large and influential governing bodies, including financial institutions, and as relates to many of you, the NCAA. It lies, too, in economic reports that question whether or not we truly have emerged from a recession. And finally, it lies in a growing questioning as to whether America's will and traditionally optimistic can-do spirit is broken. As an historian, my first instinct in such times is to look for other instances of this type of thinking, and examples are there for the taking. There was just such talk exactly 9 years and 51 weeks ago, as we suffered on September 11th, 2001, our worst attack ever on American soil. In 1979, when I was just about your age, President Carter sat in front of the nation and discussed what was then called a national malaise. And as with you today, perhaps his words did not matter all that much to me, as I was more focused on my next practice, or figuring out how to save up for a Sony Walkman, or organizing a Pong tournament. Don't worry, those references are for cheap laughs from the over 40 crowd. At that time, the issues driving the gloom, however, were nearly identical to today. Destabilization in the Middle East, oil and energy costs, and changing economic models as we dealt with the rise in commercial power in Asia. In 1979, it was Japan, not China. There was not, however, as widespread a belief that our government was broken, nor was there quite such a divisive and ugly political climate. And as often happens in our history, the particular moment passed as a new crisis erupted and our attention was drawn elsewhere. One critical difference that I've noted in observers' reactions to these similar times is the discussion of activism as a solution. Whereas in 1979, many of the writers who commented on our condition proposed governmental solutions, the majority of writers, both liberal and conservative, who are commenting on our shortcomings today, point to a renewed sense of activism, or citizen action organized intentionally to bring about change, as a key to revitalizing our nation. In 1979, I would imagine that writers had seen the excesses of 1960s activism, mass protests, demonstrations, and sit-ins against the Vietnam War, against racism, against poverty, you name it. and decided that the activist type of response had run its course. Today, with our government gridlocked, perhaps it is time for activism to raise its head. I realize that I'm treading a fine line here advocating activism to a room full of 18 and 19-year-olds, but I also firmly believe that developing a sense of activism's potential, there's that word again, should be a key part of your year here. I say this because of all the positive traits that an activist must possess, and because helping you to harness the best of these traits is what Bridgton Academy can do for you. Feeling strongly about an important cause forces you to articulate the issues clearly and understand all sides of the surrounding arguments. Will we cover that skill here? Yes. Activism entails seeing issues in a larger context and asks you to look beyond yourself and to the welfare of many others. Will a year here ask that of you? Yes. Feeling strongly and wanting to act reasonably, and perhaps sometimes civilly unreasonably, at least in the eyes of the public, is energizing and will push you to learn, think, and organize yourself to achieve such goals, not just over your year here, but in the ensuing years of your life. Do we promote those skills at Bridgton? Yes. To achieve any large and important goal, you must work and live closely and effectively with others, different or not. Will that happen here? Yes. If there's one thing I've learned in my nearly half-century on this earth, it is that individuals can effect enormous change, for both the good and sadly the bad. As you have no doubt heard over the past few years, you are living in unprecedented times, and opportunities that arise in unsettled times are, more than any other time, open to anyone. There's no age qualification. There are no rigid requirements. If you have a sincere and authentic interest in making something happen, you will find the ways to make that change occur. And virtually everything you do at Bridgton will help you in that life-defining work. I'm not asking you to drop all of your current interests and day-to-day responsibilities. I am, however, asking you to stretch and go beyond yourselves and to begin here the process of, to paraphrase Princeton University historian and activist Cornel West, helping our nation and world to revolutionize our priorities, reevaluate our values, reinvigorate our public life, and fundamentally transform our way of thinking and living. And to return to my first word of the night, my expectation for each of you is that you will start, to some degree, that process this year. None of it will be particularly easy, but it will be engaging and it will be rewarding. And as I noted early on in this talk, the students who have exceeded here, not just succeeded, but exceeded, are those who have understood both the weight and power of expectations, who have looked humbly beyond themselves, and who have harnessed the power of an activist approach to improving their lives. I wish you all the best in these endeavors, and I look forward to watching over the next 8 months the changes that each of you will bring to our community. Thank you, and I wish you all the best as you start this year.